As I said at the beginning of the evening, this is the final talk in this series, anyway, on the clinging to the stories of life, and it's living in the mystery and loving what is. So we'll see if that makes any sense in half an hour, and if not, that's okay too. So the Buddha said, things, if clung to, are suffering or are a source of suffering. And as I just said, tonight is the fourth and final offering in our series of talks by me and the wonderful Laura, who I can't see, but I think is still up behind me, on clinging to the story of life. And previously we talked about the first noble truth, there is suffering. And the second noble truth is that craving and clinging lead to suffering. So if you've been with us for the previous talks, you know we discussed a lot about stories and cookies in the context of craving and clinging. We have discussed that craving and clinging come from the stories we have about the object. So if this is our object, of our awareness, such as a cookie, it's not the cookie that causes the suffering, but the act of craving and clinging to our story of the cookie that has the potential for suffering. The story acts as a screen. I brought that tonight too. It's a teeny tiny screen. The story acts as a screen that comes between awareness and the object of awareness, so the cookie or anything else. And the first and most important step in working with clinging to our stories is awareness that the stories even exist. We can't work with that which we are not aware. Our story screens cover the object of our attention. So we make contact, but the screen arises so quickly that we don't even notice it until we are responding to the screen and not the object. We have screens that filter how we interact with most everything. It can be a fun contemplation when you make contact with the object story as you move through the day to acknowledge the story. Importantly, this contemplation is done non-judgmentally as best we can. Adding judgments is simply the act of adding another story. So as we've been contemplating over the summer in these talks, one of the stories we may be unaware of is what life is to us. Craving and clinging arise in those stories too. This impacts our relationship to life and how we live our lives. Once we become aware of the object stories, we begin to see them everywhere. Have you ever seen a video in which a doctor puts glasses on a crying baby for the first time and the baby sees the faces of their parents. The baby immediately stops crying. Eyes widen and a huge smile crosses their face. They have those videos also for hearing too, where they'll put in a hearing aid. The baby's crying because they're at a doctor's office and the doctor puts this on and all of a sudden they're like, right? That's a good representation of what happens once we see all the screens. How we've been believing them as true. And how those screens come between us and some real sense of living. Joy emerges when we see clearly through our mindful awareness what is under the stories. When we make direct contact with life. Who would you be without the story? We have a natural desire to exist. Everything in our biological bodies exists and functions for the purpose of keeping us alive. The body clings to life automatically, hardwired for self-preservation. We may reach moments of beautiful equanimity, ease, balance, calm, but then get out on the road and have someone cut you off. That hard wiring takes over and shows up in some less than equanimous thinking. Cravings and clinging arise in our desire to exist. The Buddha identified 3 types of craving. They are craving for existence, craving for sensual pleasures, and craving for non-existence. Thich Nhat Hanh adds to this by saying there are 2 kinds of people, those who want to live forever and those who do not. Craving for existence. Anand Thupten says, our instincts and desires are fine in themselves. Craving seems to be unhealthy. It is more like a neurotic level of desire. It's almost like a neurotic obsession to exist. And that craving is usually accompanied by lots of fear and insecurity. It is a fear of death, and it sometimes comes with violence. There is violence in fighting against reality, impermanence, and change. Our craving for existence is likely influenced by our ideas of non-existence. To know what our story of life is, we must know what our story of death is. If you go looking for what are our stories of life, you find lots and lots of stories. What story isn't a story of life? But not that much that focuses on the story of what life is. But if you look for stories of death, there are quite a few offerings. Because we have not died yet. These can only be stories of death, not the experience of death itself. Death is both a fascinating topic and something most people don't want to talk about. I'm so grateful for Laura's willingness to talk with us about death last week. How do our stories of death impact our stories of life? I was at the beach last spring while sitting on a deck looking out at the ocean on a beautiful day. For a moment, I was there with all of it. The sights, the sounds, the smells, and the feeling of the air moving across my face. And then a thought entered my mind. You better enjoy this because you're only here for a little while. With that thought, everything receded. Clinging to the experience arose. Craving for the previous experience of being at the beach, I efforted to see the beauty in the water, to appreciate the sounds of the waves and the birds, to even notice there was something to smell, and I don't think I felt the air anymore. The story of scarcity, that not enoughness of the experience, came between me and the direct contact of all the sensations of being at the beach. The story of an end to being at the beach was not the cause of the lost contact. My response to the story was, we will have thoughts. We will have stories about most everything. If in that moment I could perceive that the thought with the same non-judgmental awareness as the sights, sounds, smells, and sensations, then the thought could come and go in peace. Clinging to the thought, I begin to cling to everything, and I am no longer at the beach, but lost in my head. The suffering is not that I will leave the beach. It is that I have already left. This is true for our stories of death. Lost in a story of death, I am not in life. Again from Anam Thubten. At the moment we're able to cut through and let go of our craving for existence, we have transcended death. Then there's no more fear of death. Then there is total acceptance. But remember that acceptance does not mean we like what is happening or we just give up. It means seeing things as they are in this moment with clarity. It means letting go of clinging to stories and not arguing with reality. What remains once the stories are removed? Who would I be without the story? There was a movie that came out many years ago called Collateral Beauty. It's one of my favorite movies. It's about a joyous man who loses his love of life after his young daughter dies of brain cancer. His friends are so concerned for him that they hire actors to talk with him in the form of death, time, and love. I won't give away the whole story, but it's very moving. At one point, the character of death says, "Look for the collateral beauty." Collateral beauty. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Last week, my beloved 12-year-old furry family member, Pepper, became very ill. There were days when we believed she would not survive. Our house was full of aching hearts and lots of clinging, lots and lots of suffering. I'm very happy to say that with a lot of effort, she's doing well now. We will have more moments with Pepper. But what was so present for me throughout that difficult time was, as I shared with others what we were experiencing, I received the most beautiful, heartfelt, caring responses. People who are caring so much themselves reached out to offer care to me. I felt the depth of connection and love all the way to my core. It matters. It matters what we do and say. It really does. So what all of this comes down to for me, and we are each invited to investigate ourselves what feels true for each of us. But what all this comes down to for me is awareness of that which remains underneath all the stories and seems to matter the most. Once I make direct contact with a core of what is love and connection. This is the collateral beauty found within the suffering. In the movie, the character of love says, "I'm the darkness and the light. I'm the sunshine and the storm. Yes, you're right, I was there in her laugh, but I'm also here now in your pain. I'm the reason for everything. I am the only why. Don't try and live without me." And this from Thich Nhat Hanh. I think God is on earth inside every living being. What we call the divine is none other than the energy of awakening, of peace, of understanding, and of love, which is to be found not only in every human being, but in every species on earth. So what is life? I don't know. It is a mystery. Right now, it's chair, fan, connection, heartbeat, coolness. Before my father passed away, he would frequently offer this quote from John Lennon: "Life is what happens to you when you are busy making other plans." That's the best definition I have found so far. Would we wish for it to always be happy and wonderful? Maybe. But if this was so, we may never become aware of the collateral beauty of our true nature. I love my pepper. It's a funny thing we humans do. We intentionally choose to bring a furry friend into our lives, knowing full well how it will end. Yet we still do it. Why? I had the thought last week that I will never have another dog because I cannot go through this ever again. Can you hear the story in there? The craving for feeling less pain, the clinging to wanting things to stay the same. And so, would I deny myself the whole of everything that was gifted to me from having Pepper in my life? No. That's an awful idea. As Marlin says to Dory in Finding Nemo, I promised I would never let anything happen to him. To which Dory replies, that's a funny thing to promise. Then nothing would ever happen. I have a story that Pepper should not be sick. I can't tolerate the pain of losing her. This is awful. Who would I be without the story? The story of I, me, or mine, taking it all so personally. I would be a person loving Pepper, even through the painful moments. I would be a person with her now and not lost in some story of a moment when she may not be here anymore. Byron Katie asks the question, is it grief or is it love you're feeling? When it's about the story of I, me, or mine, it feels like grief. When it's not about I, me, or mine, it's love. So we have a natural desire to exist. When craving and clinging arise in this desire, we are no longer existing, but lost in story. We push this away and hold on to that. We will have thoughts and stories, They can be wholesome and are actually quite useful in our day-to-day lives. The stories help us connect to meaning. We just need to see them through mindful awareness and check out what impact they have on us. When we can do this, the stories become less sticky. We can embrace them with love and compassion and let them go when it is time. We can love what is. Who would you be without the story? Here's a poem by Stephen Levine. We walk through half our life as if it were a fevered dream, barely touching the ground, our eyes half open, our heart half closed. Not half knowing who we are, we watch the ghost of us drift from room to room, through friends and lovers, never quite as real as advertised. Not saying half we mean, or meaning half we say. We dream ourselves from birth to birth, seeking some true self until the fever breaks. And the heart cannot abide a moment longer as the rest of us awakens, summoned from the dream, not half caring for anything but love. And I'm going to leave you with this one final note. Life is finding a baby cricket in your house and realizing you have 3 cats. It's getting down on your hands and knees to catch the cricket and crawling across the floor, chasing after it as it eludes you easily. It's thinking that your family would laugh if they rounded the corner and found you doing this. It's finally catching the cricket in a cup and carefully taking it outside, realizing what a beautiful morning it is, seeing the birds and the squirrels. It's letting the little creature go in the grass and wishing them well. And a laugh rising from deep within at the whole experience. It's noting how nice it is to laugh. It's noticing the morning coffee tasted even better after all of that. Probably because I tasted it. Thank you.